Hello, this is Ashton's Rants, episode 13. Today I'm going to talk about leasing beats. Now, generally speaking, leasing beats is going to cause more problems than it's going to create advantages, but I do want to go over where leasing beats can be an advantage and something to consider. So one advantage of leasing beats is when you're just starting out, because the cost to entry is a lot less than if you were to buy a custom beat or buy a beat exclusive off somebody. And this is great because if you're just starting out, your songs probably aren't going to be that great, and you want to be able to do as many songs as you can and start getting your feet wet with the whole process, the performance, the writing, everything, without having to spend like a ton of money. So leasing beats is always an advantage for that, and I always recommend people just starting out, when they're asking me about beats or whatever, I'll always kind of suggest, well, maybe for a few anyway, you want to just lease the beats just to kind of get going. Another advantage of leasing beats is there are a lot on hand on some of these websites. So you can just scroll through thousands of beats and find something proper that works for you and that you can write to. So it's really, really quick. It's a quick way to get the beat that you want and start writing to. And now here's a few disadvantages with leasing beats. So the first disadvantage of leasing beats is the limitations that a lot of these contracts have. A lot of them will have limitations as to how many, back in the day, how many albums you could sell, stream limits, maybe streaming platform limits. There's all sorts of limits that, if you're really getting serious, why would you want to have those things that you're all striving for? Now you can't achieve them with the song that you're writing. It would be a lot better for you to get a song or get a beat that that can, the sky's the limit. It can go as far as you can take it. Another issue that I had happen to a client of mine was he wrote this absolutely killer song on this beat, and he kind of sat on it for a while. And then when it was time, he decided no, it's actually worth me buying the exclusive rights to this beat. And he wasn't able to. Someone had already done it. So sometimes there's a limitation to when you can buy something. Mainly, if someone else buys it first, then you're not going to be able to buy it exclusive either. Obviously, then it wouldn't be exclusive. So that was really disappointing because this song was, I can't stress enough, it was a really, really good song. And now he was kind of limited as to what he could do with it. Another issue is if the beat's leased, it's probably going to end up being leased to more than one person. So all of a sudden, you've written this really, really killer song, and you might find that there's other people on it. And then it's almost like a race to whoever becomes more successful with it. And if it's not you, you're kind of out of luck. Now all of a sudden you're kind of doing a song on someone else's track. And that in itself can be disappointing as well, because now it doesn't seem like an original creation as much as it did before. And along those lines, this can become really problematic with our new digital age that we live in, because YouTube, Spotify, they all have tracking algorithms that can track the music really, really well. So what can end up happening, and I've seen this happen a few times to people, is you end up leasing the beat, you put all this work and money into the song. When you upload it, you get flagged because someone else who released it first ends up taking ownership of it. And this issue can sometimes be resolved with the actual beat maker, because they can possibly, as being the copyright owner, they can explain to YouTube or Spotify that they've leased this out to multiple people who all have the right to it. But again, it's a big hassle. It's something that you don't really want to experience, especially with deadlines being so tight. Like my last song, I had things lined up with a PR company, so I couldn't really afford to delay my release if I was leasing a beat and came into that problem, which I didn't, but I don't want to. And then another thing that doesn't just apply to leasing beats, but just getting beats off people in general, something you have to be really careful about is that they didn't use samples that aren't pre-cleared. If you look, there's a lot of beat makers that use samples of old jazz records, old records and whatnot, but they haven't cleared it. And sometimes they'll actually be really blunt about that in the contract, and it'll say they're not responsible for clearing samples. And the way I kind of describe that is you're kind of selling something that doesn't belong to you. So you've bought this beat and you end up using it, and then you can run into a bunch of problems. You can, again, it could be flagged on Spotify or YouTube, or if your song gets big enough then someone who owned the sample can actually come at you and sue you for either damages or ask you to remove the song entirely. So again, when you buy a beat or lease a beat with samples that aren't cleared, you basically bought something or leased something that that person wasn't really allowed to sell. They didn't own it. And it can run into a lot of problems. I know when I make beats, because I'm a musician as well, like playing like guitar and I can play keys a bit, I like to make some licks or little loops of instruments and make it sound like I sampled them rather than go through the trouble of clearing a sample, which can be really expensive. I remember when I first got started out, there was somebody that I worked with that sampled the guitar riff from Sweet Home Alabama. And just out of curiosity, I was like, well, I'll make a few calls for you and see what we can do. And they wanted 25,000 US to clear that sample. Obviously, that wasn't happening. And I'll tell you something, we didn't end up going with that. We ended up kind of redoing it and making something that was our own that we didn't have to clear. And that demo went across the desks of Universal, who I think was responsible, like who owned that record. And they actually contacted us and said, hey, what's up? You owe us 25,000 US, and not knowing that we didn't actually use the sample. So this stuff is pretty serious. You don't want to mess around with this. When you're looking for beats, you're going to want to find somebody that you can relate to, that can make stuff that you're really loving, but also that is willing to sell you the beats at a price that you can afford, that can get you going, and doesn't use samples so that it doesn't cause you legal ramifications later. Basically, you want to pair up with somebody or a few people that can relate to your music, want to be involved, and can create a big part of your sound, which is basically the music, and help you grow your career.